The slap landed before I could even breathe. Her hand cracked against my cheek, sharp and humiliating. The ballroom froze. 130 witnesses stopped mid-laughter. Forks hovered in the air. Music died into silence. My glasses slipped from my face and shattered on the marble floor. The sting burned across my skin. But deeper than the pain was the hollow collapse inside my chest. I had not been struck since childhood. Now at 68 years old, I was hit by the woman my son had chosen to marry. I am Evelyn Hart, a widow, a former accountant, a woman who once balanced the ledgers of large companies. These days I spend mornings arranging flowers at the community garden shop. It keeps my hands steady and my heart quiet. I live in a modest apartment overlooking the river, furnished with memories instead of luxury. Sienna, my new daughter-in-law, stood tall in her $500,000 wedding gown. She raised her hand again, not to strike, but to demand. Her palm opened elegant and venomous. Her voice cut the silence keys. She wanted my home. The very place where Robert, my late husband, and I built 30 years of life. The apartment where our son Evan had once taken his first steps. The walls painted by our own hands, the balcony where Robert whispered numbers of the stars. Evan lowered his eyes to the floor. He did not defend me. He did not even raise his head. His silence was heavier than the slap. Every whisper in the hall pressed against me like stones. My heart raced, but my voice did not tremble. I bent, slowly picked up the broken glasses, and placed them on the table. Then I touched the small brass keychain hanging from my bag. A worn circle of metal scratched, but unyielding. Robert had given it to me on our 25th anniversary. Every home needs a guardian, he had said. That key had always been more than metal. It was dignity. I pressed it in my palm and let my breath slow serene against the storm. My cheek still burned. My chest still felt suffocated. But inside something steadier took shape. I leaned close enough for Sienna to hear, though the microphone above us caught the words too. 30 minutes, I whispered. 30 minutes, and the truth will arrive. Her brow furrowed, her painted lips curled in contempt. But I was already turning away. I pulled my phone from my clutch and pressed the single number I had prepared. Caleb Ortiz answered on the first ring. A steady voice, my old colleague in finance, now a lawyer. I said only, "Bring the files. Bring all of them." 30 minutes. Then I ended the call. The air shifted. Some guests gasped. Others whispered like dry leaves in autumn wind. I walked past the rows of crystal chairs and silver-lined tables. Eyes followed me, venomous, pitying, curious. I kept my head high. Not one tear was allowed to fall. At the door, I paused. In the mirrored wall, I saw my own reflection hair pinned neatly, skin-lined with years, one cheek, flushed red from the slap. Behind me, Sienna glittered in silk and diamonds. Around her, laughter began to rise again, brittle and cruel. I set my phone timer. 30 minutes. The digits glowed like fire in my hand. Each second, a heartbeat. Each tick a step towards something they did not expect. I stepped into the corridor. The music resumed faintly inside the hall, muffled and distorted. The scent of roses and champagne clung to my dress, mixed with the sharp salt of my own skin. I gripped the keychain tighter, the brass warm now against my palm. My chest was still heavy, yet within that suffocating weight, I felt a spark. I remembered Robert's voice. I remembered Evan as a boy, pressing tiny hands against my cheek after falling on the playground. I remembered promises that love would protect us. And I remembered the ledger books where every number had to reconcile every lie eventually met by a line of truth. Inside the ballroom, they believed I was defeated. They believed silence meant surrender. But silence can also be preparation. 30 minutes. Then the paper would speak louder than their insults. I adjusted my scarf, lifted my chin, and walked toward the main entrance. Behind me, a woman who called herself family demanded what was not hers. Ahead of me, a man carrying folders of truth was already on his way. The clock was ticking, and so was justice. The kitchen door was cracked open. I heard her voice before I saw her, sharp, rehearsed, dripping with calculation. If we can force her to move, we stay in that river apartment for now. The view alone is worth every lie. It was Sienna. Her words sliced through the clatter of plates and silver. She thought no one was listening. But Jonas Pike, my old neighbor, was delivering a case of wine to the back hallway. He leaned near the vent above the counter, caught every word, and later whispered it to me. That night, the ballroom seemed colder in memory. Not the glitter of chandeliers, but the venom tucked into her casual tone. Not the sparkle of her dress, but the sharpness of her plan. I realized then the slap was not an accident of rage. It was strategy. It was contempt that had been building for months, waiting for its stage. I walked home with my cheek still sore. In the quiet of my apartment, I saw the contrasts everywhere. On the mantel sat a porcelain vase, cracked but carefully mended. Next to it, a bouquet of flowers I had arranged that morning, wild stems clipped from the community garden. On the chair rested my old canvas wallet edges, frayed zipper nearly broken. These objects were plain, but they were mine. They carried memory, not spectacle. Yet I could not ignore the images of that ballroom. Sienna in a gown worth more than a year of my pension, tables dressed in white silk, guests sipping champagne without a thought of the cost. The distance between my simple home and their stage had never felt so wide. The vase reminded me of Robert. One night years ago, it had slipped from his hands. The porcelain shattered across the kitchen tiles. I had rushed in ready to scold him for carelessness, but he simply picked up the pieces, smiled and said, "Even broken things can be whole again with care." He repaired the cracks with patience. The vase still held water, still carried flowers. That was Robert's way. Quiet strength, quiet repair. Later that evening, I sat at the small wooden table by the window. The city lights blinked against the river. I opened the cedar box Robert had left for me. Inside was the letter I had read only once since his funeral. The paper had softened with time, but his handwriting was steady. "If one day our son forgets who you are, if he is blinded by voices not his own, let the paperwork remind him. Love can fail, memory can fade, but truth written and signed will endure." I traced the ink with my fingertip. It steadied me more than any drink or pill could. Robert had known. He had prepared for the possibility that loyalty might fracture. The next morning, I brewed coffee and placed Robert's letter on the table beside my cup. The phone buzzed. It was Jonas. His voice was firm low. I heard her, clear as day. She was planning it before the slap. She wanted the apartment Evelyn. She wanted it all. I thanked him, though my throat tightened as I spoke. It was one thing to suspect, another to hear it confirmed. Jonas paused before hanging up. "Don't let her take your ground. You have more strength than you think." I set the phone down. My mind ticked like the metronome Robert once used when he played piano. The patterns were forming. The slap was only the surface. Beneath it lay debt schemes and quiet manipulations. I began to gather pieces of the puzzle. Unopened letters Evan had left on my counter months earlier. Past due notices from the rental company. A glimpse of a credit card statement I had accidentally seen when Evan borrowed my laptop. Numbers floated back with chilling clarity. $80,000 in credit card debt. 3 months of rent unpaid on their condo. Car payments swallowing 60% of Evan's monthly income. No wonder Sienna wanted my apartment. No wonder she saw me not as a mother, but as an obstacle. To her, my keyring was not a symbol of family. It was leverage against drowning. I gripped Robert's letter again. The words rang louder than any scream. Let the paperwork remind him. That afternoon, I called Amelia Rhodes. She had been a colleague from my accounting days, now working in real estate and financial consulting. We met in a small cafe near the courthouse. The air smelled of burnt espresso and rain-damp coats. Amelia laid a folder on the table, her manicured nails tapping against the cover. "I ran a surface check," she said. Her eyes softened when she looked at me, but her tone stayed professional. "They are drowning Evelyn. 80,000 in revolving credit, past due rent notices, and Evan's car lease is bleeding him dry." She flipped the pages. There were numbers bold and undeniable. "Interest rates climbing, collection notices looming." Amelia pushed one sheet forward. "Here is the deposit Sienna made for the wedding. It was covered by a loan in Evan's name. $53,000. It is unpaid." I felt the weight in my chest, not shock anymore, but confirmation. The slap had not been a single insult. It was the tip of a mountain of contempt. I sat back, fingers curling around the edge of my cup. Steam rose into my face, hot and stinging like truth itself. My cheek still ached faintly, a reminder of public humiliation. But now the wound was joined by clarity. Amelia reached across her hand, resting over mine. "You have to protect yourself," she said. "This is more than family tension. This is financial exploitation. And if you do nothing, they will take everything." Her words did not frighten me. They anchored me. I heard Robert again, steady and unyielding. "Truth written and signed will endure." I folded the letter back into my purse. My decision was no longer wavering. The patterns of contempt were clear. The numbers had spoken, and I had spent a lifetime balancing books. When I left the cafe, the rain had stopped. Puddles mirrored the lights of passing cars. I tightened my coat and held the folder Amelia had given me. The city hummed indifferent, yet I felt the ground steady beneath me. That night at my kitchen table, I laid out every page, every statement, every past due notice. The papers spread like a map of betrayal, but also a blueprint for justice. I whispered into the stillness of my apartment, "Robert, I will not let them erase what we built." The cracked vase held fresh water. The bouquet of wildflowers stood tall. The keychain glimmered in the lamp's glow. These were not signs of weakness. They were reminders. I picked up the phone once more. Amelia's name shone on the screen. When she answered, I spoke without hesitation. "It is time. I want to investigate everything. Every loan, every signature, every hidden account. I will not be blindsided again." Her voice was calm, certain. "We will get to the bottom of it. You have my word." That night, I set Robert's letter on the nightstand. My hand lingered on the faded ink. If love could not guide my son, then truth would. If memory had been buried, then paper would unearth it. My eyes closed, but my resolve did not soften. Tomorrow I would begin. Not with anger, but with numbers. Not with rage, but with balance. The patterns of contempt had revealed themselves, and I, Evelyn Hart, would answer them with proof. I had chosen the path. I would investigate with Amelia by my side. The next chapter of this battle had already begun. Amelia spread the papers across the cafe table. Her nails clicked against the folder. Her words cut sharper than any slap. "Does this wedding gown look worth 80,000 in debt?" The pages fanned out between us. Receipts, statements, overdue notices. I forced my trembling hand to stay firm as I reached for the top sheet. The paper was warm from her touch, but the numbers were cold. $80,000, 3 months late on rent. Car installments devouring 60% of income. Every digit was a stone pressing against my chest. One slip bore the logo of a bank I knew well. It showed the $53,000 loan that had covered the wedding deposit. The signature was Evans. The ink was hurried, desperate. Another page listed transfers from my own account. $4,500, month after month, 36 times, $162,000 in 3 years. I traced the numbers with the tip of my finger. They blurred as my eyes filled, but I refused to look away. I had called it help. They had called it love. But here in black ink, it looked like exploitation. Amelia tapped another page. "This is your money, Evelyn. These are your sacrifices." Her tone was not cruel. It was steady, professional, but laced with urgency. "They are not drowning by accident. They are dragging you with them." I felt my chest rise and fall. The air in the cafe tasted of burned beans and bitterness. A couple at the next table laughed softly, unaware that my world was being measured in debts and betrayals. My fingers shook. Yet when I laid the receipts back on the table, my palm pressed them down with weight. Not weakness, but decision. I remembered Robert's letter. If love failed, let paperwork speak. If memory faded, let signatures endure. I reached into my purse, pulled out my phone, and scrolled to a single name. Caleb Ortiz, former colleague, now attorney, the one person who had balanced my ledgers when grief had left me blind. I pressed call. The ring buzzed against my ear like a drumbeat. "Evelyn," he answered. His voice was calm, measured. A man who knew that numbers told stories sharper than gossip. "Caleb," I said. "I need you to draft an immediate suspension of all transfers, cancel every guarantee in Evan's name, rewrite the will, redirect everything into a fund for elder protection." There was no hesitation on his end. "Understood," he replied. "I will draw the papers now." Amelia's eyes widened slightly, but she nodded. "This is the only way," she whispered. "Paperwork over promises." My breath steadied. The trembling in my fingers eased, replaced by a quiet firmness. For the first time since the ballroom, I felt control sliding back into my hands. I turned to Amelia. They wanted my silence. They will get my documents instead. Caleb's voice hummed again through the phone. "One more thing. Where are you right now?" "At the cafe near the courthouse," I said. "Amelia has shown me enough to know I will not wait." A pause. Then his tone sharpened. 30 minutes. I will meet you at the ballroom. Bring the folder. Let the truth arrive on their stage." The microphone popped. Glasses clinked in nervous hands. A bridesmaid lowered her champagne eyes wide. The numbers didn't echo like words. They rang through marble and crystal, as if the whole hall itself had turned into a bell. This time, not just to myself, but to the world. I ended the call and folded the papers back into the folder. Amelia slid the clasp shut, her hand lingering over mine. "You know this will change everything," she said. I met her eyes. "It already has." We left the cafe together. The rain had stopped, but the streets still glistened with puddles. Each reflection of light trembled like the surface of my own heart, but beneath the current ran steady. At home, I prepared quickly. I set Robert's letter into my purse beside the folder of debts and transfers. The brass keychain hung heavy in my palm. I kissed it once, not in farewell, but in resolve. This was no longer only about a slap. It was about dignity measured in ink and balance sheets. The ride back to the ballroom felt unreal. My hands rested on the folder knuckles, white nails pressed into paper edges. Outside the window, the city rushed past. Inside, my pulse kept the same rhythm as the countdown clock on my phone. 28 minutes, 27. Each second was both a blade and a shield. I closed my eyes and whispered to Robert, "If our son cannot remember, then the papers will. If love fails, numbers will not." The car stopped. The driver opened the door. Crystal chandeliers burned above, yet the air felt cold. The marble floor reflected faces, each one frozen between disbelief and shame, but her hands curled tight around the silver stem of her glass. Her eyes darted toward Evan, wide with panic. Evan shifted in place, his jaw-locked gaze pinned to the floor. Caleb's voice carried through the microphone, steady as a gavel. $53,000. The loan that guaranteed this wedding has been cancelled. Gasps broke like waves against the marble walls. The numbers hit harder than any insult. I felt the weight of them ripple through the crowd, each syllable heavier than the last. Caleb lifted another sheet, bold letters, facing the camera phones. $4,500 transferred monthly for 36 months. $162,000. That ends tonight. A chair scraped against the marble. Someone's flute tilted, spilling champagne on lace. Two mothers exchanged frantic looks, hands half covering their lips. The weight of my quiet sacrifices, once invisible, now thundered in public. My hand clutched the brass keychain in my purse. It pressed into my palm, warm, firm. Robert's voice seemed to rise with Caleb's. If love failed, let paperwork speak. Sienna staggered back a step, the train of her gown dragging against the floor. Her voice cracked. You cannot do this. This is our night. Caleb did not flinch. His tone was unyielding. The rental guarantee in Evan Hart's name has also been revoked. Effective immediately. The manager of the hall, Mr. Duarte, stepped forward. His black suit caught the stage lights, his hands folded behind his back. He cleared his throat loud enough to hush the whispers. Unless payment is secured tonight, we stop the music. We ask the guests to leave. The announcement struck like thunder. Laughter died. Forks clinked against porcelain. 130 faces turned pale under the chandeliers. My chest rose with a breath that had waited years. The sting of the slap was still alive on my cheek, but this time the burn was not shame. It was vindication. I watched Sienna stumble closer to Evan nails clawing at his sleeve. Fix this, do something, make her stop. Her voice climbed shrill, breaking into sobs. The cruelty that had once hidden behind polished manners now spilled raw into the open. Evan's lips moved, but no sound came. His silence was louder than screams. For the first time, the crowd saw him not as a groom, but as a man cornered by truth. I felt the trembling return to my fingers. But this time, it was not weakness. It was energy rising a pulse, matching the click of phone cameras around us. The evidence was no longer trapped in drawers and envelopes. It was alive, amplified by every lens, every whisper, every shocked glance. The broken vase at home, the faded wallet, the letter Robert left me, they had led me here. This was not revenge. It was balance restored in the most public of stages. Caleb raised his hand for silence. Ladies and gentlemen, he said, these documents are public record. Financial exploitation of a parent is not a private affair. It is a crime of dignity. The words rang clear, bouncing against the marble, piercing the chandeliers, lodging in every guest's conscience. No one laughed. No one looked away. Sienna's body shook. Her hand flew to her face, smearing makeup across her cheek. Her shriek tore through the silence. This cannot be happening. Not to me. Not here. The crowd gasped in unison. 130 voices inhaled together, stunned. Phones lifted higher, capturing her collapse. I stood at the edge of the room, the shadows cloaking me. I did not need to shout. I did not need to gloat. My silence was enough. The silence of survival. The silence of truth, surfacing after years of contempt. The countdown had struck 0. The power had reversed. Sienna's wail echoed through the hall. Her words fractured into disbelief. Impossible. This is impossible. The crowd gasped again, a single sound that sealed the moment. The slap had been public. So was the truth. And now the stage belonged not to their spectacle, but to my dignity. Their footsteps approached before the music even died. Sienna's parents closed in from both sides, their perfume thick with authority, their voices hushed but venomous. If you do not cooperate, we will file a petition. Mental incapacity. You will lose everything. The words struck colder than the marble under my shoes. They did not shout. They whispered like conspirators, weaving poison into silk. The chandeliers gleamed above, but shadows pooled around us. Their threat was clear. Erase your dignity, or they would erase you. I steadied my hand on the brass keychain inside my purse. Its weight pressed into my palm. I let its firmness answer the tremor rising in my chest. Robert's letter pulsed in memory. If love fails, let paperwork speak. I would not be silenced by threats. Still, my body betrayed me. A shiver climbed my spine, the kind that comes when predators circle. My lips parted, but before I could speak a softer sound broke through. Mom. It was Evan. He stood just behind them, his voice almost lost in the shuffle. For a moment he looked 10 years old again, clutching my hand on the first day of school, whispering, I will protect you. Now he whispered again, broken. I am sorry. The glimpse was fleeting, gone in the space of a breath. He turned his face away, caught between wife and mother, between loyalty and fear. The boy I once knew flickered behind the man he had become. The crowd had not dispersed. Phones still hovered, recording flashing. And then the ripple began. Someone shouted, "It's online." Gasps. Screens lit across the hall. The slap captured in perfect clarity, my glasses shattering. Sienna's hand raised high, her voice demanding keys. And then Caleb's announcement numbers, cutting through the silence like thunder. The clip spread faster than fire. Guests shoved phones toward each other, gasping. Faces turned pale, some turned away. But the current could not be stopped. What had been humiliation was now evidence. What had been a slap was now a symbol. I closed my eyes for one breath. The vase with its golden cracks, the faded wallet, the trembling but firm hand, all of them were now part of a story larger than me. A story the world had begun to witness. Sienna shrieked, her voice jagged. "Stop recording. This is private." But nothing was private anymore. The marble walls echoed with digital permanence. No silence could erase the truth now. And then the door opened again. Not with music, not with laughter, but with the steady steps of a man in uniform. A court messenger. In his hand, a sealed envelope. He moved through the frozen guests with the authority of law. He stopped before me. His voice carried in the hush. "Mrs. Evelyn Hart, you have been served." The envelope touched my hand, its paper rough, its seal unbroken. I knew before I opened it. A guardianship petition, an accusation of incapacity. They wanted to strip me not only of home and money, but of mind, of voice, of autonomy. The hall erupted in whispers, phones tilted closer. Some gasped, some sneered, some simply stared. I drew a long breath, steadying the tremor in my chest. The paper in my hand was not defeat. It was just another battlefield. Robert's words steadied me again. "If memory fades, let signatures endure." I looked at the messenger, then at Sienna's parents, whose smiles curled sharp as knives. My cheek still burned from her slap. My hand still clenched the keychain. But my voice, when it came, was calm. "Thank you," I told the messenger. I slid the envelope into my purse beside Robert's letter. Sienna screamed. Her parents hissed. Evan stood frozen, his face pale, his mouth shut. The guests leaned closer, their cameras glowing brighter. The story had already left this room, carried on 1,000 screens, 1,000 voices. I turned slowly, facing the chandeliers, the marble, the sea of eyes. "This is not shame," I whispered. "This is proof." I did not need to raise my voice. The microphones caught every word. The internet would carry them further than the hall ever could. The petition was real. The threat was real. But so was my resolve. And as the weight of the envelope pressed into my purse, the gasps of the hall told me the balance had shifted again. Not in their favor, in mine. The gavel struck once. The sound echoed across the oak-paneled courtroom, silencing every whisper. Judge Marla Chen leaned forward, her eyes sharp, her tone cutting. "This court will hear the petition for guardianship of Mrs. Evelyn Hart." The words sliced through me like cold steel. I sat at the respondent's table, my hands folded on the folder Caleb had prepared. The brass keychain pressed into my palm. Its warmth steadied me against the chill of the accusation. Sienna's parents sat across the aisle, lips tight, eyes gleaming. Sienna dabbed at her face with a silk handkerchief, her sobs staged for sympathy. Evan hunched beside her shoulders, heavy gaze fixed on the floor. He looked less like a groom and more like a prisoner of his own silence. Their lawyer rose first, voice heavy with false concern. "Your Honor, my clients believe Mrs. Hart is no longer capable of managing her affairs. They fear she has been manipulated, her judgment clouded, her finances unstable." Each word was venom wrapped in silk. They wanted me erased, reduced to a signature stripped of power. Caleb stood slowly, his suit crisp, his presence deliberate. He did not need to raise his voice. He placed a flash drive on the clerk's desk. Exhibit A, he said. Footage recorded during the wedding reception. The screen behind the judge flickered to life. The sound filled the room. The slap. My glasses shattering against marble. Sienna's voice demanding keys. Then Caleb's own words from that night. $53,000 cancelled. $4,500 a month terminated. Gasps rippled through the courtroom. Even Judge Chen's brow tightened as she watched. Caleb spoke again, voice steady. This is not confusion, Your Honor. This is exploitation. Public. Documented. Recorded by over 100 witnesses. Amelia was called next. She carried a binder thick with statements and contracts. Her heels clicked firmly against the floor as she approached the stand. Page after page appeared before the court. $80,000 in credit card debt. 3 months of unpaid rent, a $53,000 wedding deposit unpaid, $4,500 a month taken from Mrs. Hart, 36 transfers, totaling $162,000. Each figure landed like a stone. The jurors shifted. Pens scratched. No one could deny the numbers. Then came Jonas. He straightened his jacket, his weathered hands gripping the edge of the stand. His voice carried the grit of years spent fighting fires, but also the quiet honesty of a neighbor. I heard her. Clear as day. Sienna said if they forced Evelyn to move, they would stay in her apartment. I was standing by the kitchen vent. Every word is burned in my memory. No theatrics, no hesitation. Just truth, simple and sharp. The opposing lawyer tried to fight back. Your Honor, this is hearsay. This is bitterness dressed as testimony. But Jonas's eyes did not waver. I have no reason to lie. She was planning it. That slap was no accident. It was contempt. Judge Chen nodded her pen, moving slowly across the page. The final witness was Dr. Morgan, a physician who had examined me only a week earlier. Her voice was clinical precise. Mrs. Hart is fully competent, cognitively intact, financially literate, capable of independent decision-making. Her words washed over me like sunlight breaking through storm clouds. The petition's foundation cracked beneath them. I felt the brass keychain in my pocket warm against my skin. Robert's letter rested inside my purse, his handwriting etched into my memory. If love fails, let paperwork speak. And here in this courtroom, paperwork was shouting. Caleb rose for closing arguments. His voice did not tremble. This is not a case of incapacity. This is a case of betrayal. The numbers are consistent. The timeline is unbroken. The evidence is irrefutable. The petition is not only baseless, it is malicious. The courtroom hushed. Judge Chen leaned back, eyes sweeping across the rows of faces. Her silence pressed heavier than words. Then she leaned forward again. This court finds no evidence of incapacity. The petition for guardianship is denied. The gavel struck. The sound was final, resonant, undeniable. But Judge Chen did not stop. She turned her gaze toward Sienna's parents. Furthermore, this court orders petitioners to pay the respondents' legal fees and costs, $45,000. The words cracked across the room like lightning. Sienna's mother gasped. Her father's face flushed crimson. Sienna covered her mouth, eyes wide, tears smeared across her cheeks. The courtroom erupted in whispers. Phones buzzed, reporters scribbled, cameras clicked. The story that had begun with a slap now thundered with the force of judgment. I closed my eyes for one breath. The sting on my cheek had faded, but the echo of it lingered. Now it carried new meaning, not shame, proof, vindication. The petition lay in ruins. Their attempt to erase me had been turned back, pierced by numbers, witnesses, and truth. $45,000 now stood as their penalty. The power had reversed again, not with fists, not with rage, but with paperwork signatures and the steady voice of justice. The morning after the verdict, my phone would not stop buzzing. The clip of the slap, the cancelled transfers, the court's ruling, all of it, had escaped the marble walls and entered every living room in America. Hashtags spread like wildfire. One stood out above them all. Let the paperwork speak. The phrase Robert had written in his letter, the one that kept me steady through betrayal, had become a banner of quiet revolt. Thousands posted it. Elder advocates, young people who saw their grandparents in me, even strangers who simply believed in fairness. Then came the invitation. Dana Reeves, the woman whose face had anchored the nation's most-watched talk show for 20 years. Her producers called Caleb first. By that evening, I was seated in a studio, lights hot on my face, the smell of fresh coffee drifting from the crew's cups. Dana leaned forward, her expression sharp but kind. "Mrs. Hart," she said, "America has seen the clip. But I want them to hear the story from you." I did not list dates or figures. I let dialogue carry what lists could not. She looked at me. I told Dana and said keys. When I said no, her hand struck. It was not just skin meeting skin. It was contempt. It was the sound of being erased. The audience in the studio shifted. Some gasped. Some shook their heads. No one looked away. Dana's eyes did not leave mine. "And what gave you strength in that moment?" I slipped my hand into my purse and touched the folded paper inside. Words from my husband. He wrote, "If love fails, let paperwork speak." That letter carried me when voices failed me. Caleb was invited to join the second segment. His voice cut with clarity. Elder financial abuse is not rare. It is epidemic. It hides behind weddings, behind family gatherings, behind smiles. But every transfer leaves a trace. Every number is a breadcrumb. The law can follow those breadcrumbs if we have the courage to bring them forward. The audience applauded, but I saw more than applause. I saw recognition, faces nodding, lips pressing tight as memories surfaced. They knew this story was not mine alone. The fallout came quickly. Evan's employer released a statement within days. The firm could not tolerate an employee tied to such scandal. He lost his job. Sienna's contracts crumbled too. The companies that had used her face for glossy campaigns backed away overnight. No confidence in her image, the press releases read. The woman who once slapped me beneath chandeliers now hid from cameras. I should have felt triumph. Instead, I felt the hollow echo of justice. It never erases the bruise, but it steadies the hand that carries it. Weeks passed, but the story did not fade. Clips replayed on morning news, dissected on podcasts, reposted with captions in languages I could not read. And then came the night I chose not to stay silent any longer. I walked onto a small stage at a community center in Springvale. The room smelled of old books and fresh lilies. Reporters sat in the back. Local families filled the folding chairs. At the podium, I placed a single envelope. Not Robert's letter, a new one. I let the microphone carry my words. 30 minutes. That was all it took for my life to tilt. 30 minutes between a slap and a petition to erase me. But in those same 30 minutes, paperwork saved me. And so today, I want that power not to end with me. I opened the envelope and unfolded the announcement. The Elder Dignity Fund. I said, letting each word settle. A foundation to provide legal support for older adults facing financial exploitation, to make sure no one faces silence alone. The room erupted in applause. Not polite, not staged, but raw. Hands clapped, feet stomped some, cried out loud. It was not about me anymore. It was about every person who had once clutched a cracked vase, or an old wallet, or a fading letter, wondering if anyone would listen. Phones lifted again, but this time I did not dread them. Every camera became an ally. Every recording, a promise that dignity would not vanish in silence. Dana Reeves invited me back the next week, this time not as a victim, but as a founder. Behind me on the screen flashed the hashtag now tied to my name, Let the Paperwork Speak. The world had chosen. The internet had chosen. And in their choice, I found not vengeance, but momentum. The slap still burned in memory, but now it burned as a spark. From contempt had come clarity. From humiliation had come foundation. From silence had come a voice. The fund was no longer just an idea. It was a signature, a legal entity, a door held open for others. And in that moment, as applause rolled over me like a tide, I felt Robert's words breathe new life. If love fails, let paperwork speak. And now paperwork was singing. The knock came during the storm. Rain battered the windows. Wind pressed against the shutters. Thunder rolled across the sky. I opened the door and saw him standing there. Evan. Alone. His suit jacket clung damp to his shoulders, his eyes hollow from sleepless nights. For the first time in weeks, he looked not like a man defending pride, but like a boy who had lost his way. He whispered, "Mum, please. I need to talk." I let him in. The living room smelled of chamomile and old paper. The cracked porcelain vase sat on the mantel, holding the last of the garden lilies. The faded wallet rested on the side table. These quiet anchors reminded me who I was and what could not be stolen. Evan sat hands trembling as he pressed them together. I made mistakes. I chose her over you. I watched and stayed silent. I told myself it was survival. But I was wrong. His voice broke into pieces. I am losing everything. My job, my reputation, my marriage. Mum, I am drowning. I did not answer immediately. Instead, I reached for the wooden box tucked beneath the sofa. Inside was the letter Robert had left me. The paper had yellowed, but the ink still held firm. I unfolded it slowly, the sound of rain filling the silence. I read aloud, my voice steady, though my hands shook. Love must always walk with boundaries. Without them, love becomes control. Without them, love turns into loss. Evan's shoulders collapsed. He buried his face in his palms, tears soaking his skin. "Mum," he choked. "I thought if I didn't give her what she wanted, I would lose her. I thought I would lose the life I built." I placed the letter on the table, its edges catching the lamplight. "You may lose things, Evan. We all do. But do not lose your character. That is the only thing that cannot be rebuilt once it is gone." The storm pounded harder, as if to hammer each word into the night. Evan lifted his face, streaked with regret. His lips trembled. "I want to fix it. I want to make this right. Tell me what to do." I leaned back, feeling both the ache of betrayal and the pull of love. I had given him so much already, but love without conditions had nearly destroyed me. Now love had to wear armor. "You will not have my money," I said. "No rescue, no easy fix. You will start from the ground again." His breath caught almost a sob. "But Mum, my debts, pay them," I said firmly. "Every cent. With your own work. With your own hands." He shook his head desperate. "I cannot. It is too much." "Then you will learn discipline," I said. "You will face the collectors. You will sit in therapy. You will admit what you did to me, to yourself, to others. Only then, when you show me change, will we speak again about family." The words hurt to say, but they were not cruelty. They were the medicine he needed, bitter and sharp. The silence between us stretched. Only the rain filled it. Finally, Evan whispered, "I do not deserve your forgiveness." I touched the letter again. Forgiveness is not given to erase what happened. It is given to create space for change. The question is not whether I can forgive. It is whether you will change. Evan rose slowly, wiping his eyes with the sleeve of his soaked jacket. The boy I once carried seemed to flicker for a moment, caught between the man he had become and the man he might still be. He leaned toward me, voice trembling. "Thank you for not closing the door." He left into the storm, his shadow swallowed by rain. I remained seated, the letter spread on the table. Its words glowed under the lamp, steady as truth. Love with boundaries, pain with dignity, justice with compassion. Robert had written those lines for me, but tonight they had spoken to our son. Whether he would hear them fully was still unknown. But the door was open, just not without conditions. I had refused his plea for rescue. Instead, I had offered him something harder but truer, a path back paved with work, with honesty, with repair. As the storm raged outside, I felt calm inside. Boundaries had spoken. And for the first time, Evan had listened. The first client arrived with shaking hands. Her daughter had taken her pension, drained her account, and left her to survive on canned beans. She sat across from me in the very apartment Sienna once demanded her eyes wide, with both shame and hope. "This is the Elder Counseling Center," I told her softly. "You are not alone anymore." The apartment had changed. The cracked porcelain vase now gleamed with veins of gold, repaired with care. A symbol no longer of damage, but of dignity restored. The faded wallet still rested on the table, but beside it now sat neatly stacked forms, intake sheets and folders, with new names waiting for justice. Jonas sat at the desk, near the door, his broad frame steady as a shield. Once a firefighter, now my deputy. His voice was calm, his presence immovable. "Mom, we will walk with you, step by step." Leela, a retired teacher, guided a small group in the next room. Her chalk scraped across a board as she wrote words in bold gaslighting. Financial grooming, silent control. Her students, men and women with silver hair, took notes, with the focus of soldiers preparing for battle. It was no longer just my home. It was a sanctuary, a place to transform humiliation into resistance, silence into testimony. And the numbers followed. Within 6 months, our team had helped recover more than $3 million in stolen or misused assets, bank statements corrected, houses returned, names cleared. Each figure was more than money. It was years of work memory and dignity restored. One afternoon, the first victory came through the door in the form of a judgment, a judge's order signed and stamped. The client, a woman in her 70s, clutched the paper as if it were holy scripture. Her sobs broke through the room as she wrapped her arms around me. "Thank you," she cried. "Thank you for giving me back my life." Her tears soaked into my shoulder. For the first time since the slap, I cried too, not from pain, but from release. The circle of betrayal was finally cracking open into something larger than me. The community garden outside the building bloomed under spring rain. Neighbors came with seeds and spades, digging together in earth that had once been dry and abandoned. Lilies rose beside roses. Chamomile swayed in rows, releasing their calm into the air. Children watered plants with tin cans, laughter mixing with birdsong. The garden became what my living room had become, a mirror of quiet healing. Each flower a reminder that life returns even after storms. Reporters visited not for scandal now, but for inspiration. They asked for numbers, and I gave them. 3 million returned. Dozens of elders defended. Countless voices lifted. But I also gave them stories. The woman who kept a cracked coffee mug as proof she once mattered. The man who saved every receipt, now smiling because his carefulness was finally honored. The grandmother who stood taller after reading her name, cleared in bold legal print. At night, when the hall grew quiet and files rested in drawers, I sat alone with Robert's letter, its corners frayed, but its truth unbroken. Love with boundaries. Boundaries with compassion. That was the soil from which this center had grown. I touched the vase with its golden seams. Once broken, now beautiful. A symbol not of shame, but of survival. Evan visited once. He stood at the doorway, hesitant. His debts were still heavy, his therapy still fresh. He did not ask for help. He only said, "I am trying." And for the first time I believed him. I nodded, placing Robert's letter back into the box. "Then keep walking," I said. "The door will stay here, but only if you earn your way through it." He left quietly, and the storm did not follow him this time. The center pulsed with life. Phones rang, papers, shuffled voices, shared secrets too long hidden. But through the clamor, one truth carried me. The slap had not ended me, it had opened me. When that first client hugged me with judgment in her hand, victory was not just hers, it was every elder's victory. It was my husband's voice living on. It was proof that dignity once defended multiplies. the vase cracked and healed with gold. The garden blooming where silence once lived. The letter guiding each decision. The wallet worn but steady beside every new case. I did not build an empire. I built something quieter, something steadier, and in its quiet, it carried more power than chandeliers or contracts ever could. From loss, we built dignity. From betrayal, we built trust. From silence, we built voices, and the world began to listen. The chamber lights burned hotter than any ballroom chandelier. Rows of senators leaned forward, microphones ready, cameras trained on my every breath. The placard before me read, Evelyn Hart Founder, Elder Dignity Fund. The gavel struck. Mrs. Hart, the floor is yours. I gripped the edges of the table. The brass keychain pressed firm against my palm, Robert's letter tucked safe in my purse. This was not a wedding hall. This was not a courtroom. This was the heart of law itself, and I would not tremble. I began with the words the internet had carried. Let the paperwork speak. Every number, every receipt, every cancelled transfer is a voice. And behind those voices are human beings, fathers, mothers, grandparents who deserve to live with dignity. The screens around the chamber flickered alive. Clips rolled the slap, the gasps, the courtroom reversal, the foundation's work, then faces clients who had walked through our center testifying in their own voices. $3 million restored, families reunited, shame turned into strength. A senator asked, "What would you say to those who think you are fueled by revenge?" I let the silence stretch. Then I answered, steady and clear, "Kindness is not weakness. Boundaries are love. Without them, love rots into control. With them, love becomes protection." Pens scratched. Cameras zoomed. The chamber stilled. Even those who doubted leaned back, measuring the weight of my words. That night, a documentary segment aired. Dana Reeves narrated parts of my story, but the camera also lingered on the golden-seamed vase, the blooming garden, the faces of elders holding judgments in their hands. The title, Dignity Not Revenge. Letters poured in. Emails, messages, cards. Some from strangers, some from neighbors, some from children who admitted they had failed their parents and wanted to change. Then came the letter that mattered most. It was slid under my door one quiet morning. No envelope of money, no plea for rescue, just words written in Evan's uneven hand. "Mom, I see now that my silence was cruelty. I see that fear does not excuse betrayal. I am sorry. I am working. I will keep working until the man you raised can look you in the eyes again." I held the paper as rain tapped the window. I placed it beside Robert's letter in the wooden box. Two voices now sat together, one from the past, one from the present, both guiding me toward a future. The next time cameras faced me, it was not in marble halls or bright studios. It was in the quiet of my own center, surrounded by lilies and paperwork, the repaired vase catching the afternoon sun. I looked straight into the lens. This is not about me. This is about every family, every elder, every line crossed in silence. So I ask you, where are you listening from? Which city? Which home? Stand up for your parents, your grandparents, because dignity belongs to all of us. The red light on the camera blinked off. The crew packed cables, but I sat for a moment longer, feeling the calm roll over me. The story that began with humiliation had ended with something greater than victory. It had ended with healing. The vase stood whole, streaked with gold. The garden bloomed. The letters rested side by side. Boundaries had been drawn. Love had been restored, not in money, but in truth. And as the end card rolled two videos glowing on the screen, I whispered to myself, steady and serene, dignity, not revenge.